The folder slipped from my hands, papers scattering chaotically across the polished wooden desk. I stood frozen, my heartbeat pounding erratically as the bolded words on the page burned into my mind like a sentence. I squeezed my eyes shut, took a deep breath, then opened them again, hoping I had misread. But no. The words were still there, cold and merciless. All assets will be transferred to Ryan Calloway. I, Evelyn Calloway, the eldest daughter of this family, was not named in the will. Not a single cent, no explanation, nothing. My mother's voice, Helen, called up from downstairs, pulling me back to reality. "Have you found the insurance papers yet, Evie?" I jolted, quickly gathering the scattered papers, but the words still danced before my eyes, as if taunting me, reminding me that I was no longer part of their plans. They had erased me from this family. "Not yet, I'm still looking." I forced my voice to stay steady, even though a storm was raging inside me. I shoved the stack of papers into the manila envelope, my hands trembling as I sealed it. Laughter echoed from downstairs, my father's familiar deep chuckle blending with Ryan's smug, self-satisfied tone. They were celebrating. I knew why. A week ago, my younger brother had been promoted to CEO of the family corporation, and tonight this dinner was in his honor. I had planned to attend, to pretend that the blatant favoritism didn't bother me, but now I wasn't sure I could endure it. My phone buzzed on the desk. Leah. I opened her message, and as soon as I read it, I snapped a picture of the will and sent it to her. What the hell? Call me now? I grabbed my phone, rushed into the bathroom, locked the door, and called Leah. "Tell me I'm misunderstanding this," I whispered, my throat raw. "You're not," Leah's voice was sharp, cutting through my last hope. "Your parents wrote you out of the will. Everything goes to Ryan." I stared at my reflection in the mirror. My green eyes were red-rimmed, my long brown hair, usually sleek and composed, was now disheveled, a few loose strands falling across my forehead. My grip on the phone tightened. "Why? Do you want the honest answer? Because Ryan is their golden boy. That's how it's always been. They've never acknowledged you, no matter how much harder you worked than him." A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Right. Never. All my life, Ryan had been the center of everything. When he got a B average, my parents praised him for being intelligent. When I earned straight A's, they simply said, "Good job, sweetheart," before turning the conversation back to Ryan. When he wanted to launch a startup, my father invested without hesitation. When I worked to build my own business, my mother dismissed it as a little project and asked if I needed Ryan's help. I had tried to accept it. I had thought that if I worked hard enough, if I became successful enough, they would see me. They would be proud of me. But now, with this will in my hands, I realized a bitter truth. I had never truly belonged here. "What are you going to do?" Leah asked, her voice cautious. I took a deep breath. "I don't know." "I think you should fight," Leah said firmly. "They might think you'll back down, but that's not who you are." I closed my eyes. "No, that's not who I am." A knock on the door made me jump. "Evie, are you okay?" My father's voice came from the hallway. I opened my eyes and looked at myself in the mirror once more. My face had changed. I was no longer the daughter who tried to please her parents. "I'm fine. I'll be right down." I hung up, straightened my hair, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the room. If they thought I would quietly accept this, they were wrong. Very wrong. I sat silently in my office, the dim golden light reflecting off the stack of documents I had secretly taken from my parents' study. I had read the will so many times that every word was etched into my mind, but instead of surrendering to anger or despair, I decided to do what I did best: find the truth. Everything felt so sudden. My family was wealthy, owning numerous assets, real estate and business shares, yet I had been completely erased from it all. What made them do this? I opened my laptop and logged into Calloway Holdings' internal database, the family corporation where I had never been considered the rightful heir. Ryan had full access to all critical documents, but I did not. But I wasn't a fool. With my financial expertise and experience running my own company, I knew how to look for things that were meant to stay hidden. And then I found it. An old forgotten file buried in the family's real estate records, the Calloway House land lease agreement. I sat up straight, my heart pounding as I read through the documents. My family didn't actually own the land under the house. The grand estate where I had grown up, where they still lived and planned to pass down to Ryan, was only theirs through a long-term land lease from 1958. The buyer hadn't been my grandfather, but a real estate development company that had gone bankrupt in the 1990s. And the most important part, the lease was set to expire next year. I grabbed my phone and immediately called Leah. "You won't believe this," I said quickly, flipping through the pages. "Don't tell me you've found another earth-shattering secret." "My parents' house," I lowered my voice. "They don't own it, they've only been leasing the land." Silence stretched on the other end before Leah finally whispered, "What the hell?" "I'm looking at the contract right now. The land doesn't belong to them, and I just found a notice from the city council." I opened an email notification from the municipal office. "The land is going up for public auction next month." "Evelyn, tell me you're not thinking something crazy right now." I smiled, adrenaline surging through my veins. "Exactly." That night I couldn't sleep. The thought of the auction circled in my mind like a feverish obsession. If I could buy that land, I would control their house. It wouldn't just be revenge. It would be my way of reclaiming power, proving that they were wrong to erase me. I couldn't bid under my own name. My parents would find out immediately. So I needed a shell company. The next morning I called someone I trusted, David Whitmore, a real estate attorney I had worked with multiple times. "Evelyn? What's going on? Why are you calling so early?" His voice was curious. "I need to establish a real estate investment company, and I need it done immediately." David chuckled. "What are you up to?" "An investment deal," I replied calmly, "and I don't want my name attached to it." 3 days later, Everland Investments LLC was officially established. The company had only one shareholder, a private investment fund that I controlled entirely. It was untraceable, with no ties leading back to me. I sat in my office, running my fingers over the fresh set of documents David had just delivered. "It's all set," he said. "Now we just wait for auction day." Good. I opened my email, scanning for more details about the auction. The list of participants hadn't been released yet, but I had a feeling there would be strong competition. If I could win this auction, I clenched my phone tightly. Then they would have no choice but to acknowledge me. And this time, I would be the one deciding their fate. I stood in the middle of the auction hall, keeping my breathing steady as my eyes scanned the room. The space buzzed with murmurs from investors, brokers, and representatives from major real estate firms. I adjusted my blazer slightly, straightened my thin-rimmed glasses, and double-checked the auction paddle number I held tightly in my hand. Today, Everland Investments LLC would enter the auction as a mysterious investor, and I, Evelyn Calloway, was hidden in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to turn the game around. "Stay calm, Evie," David whispered beside me. He too had altered his appearance, dressed in an expensive suit with a polished demeanor, perfectly playing the role of my company's legal representative. "This is a big move, but we're prepared." I gave him a small nod, my eyes locked onto the auction stage. A middle-aged man stepped up to the podium, microphone in hand, tapping his wooden gavel lightly to signal the event's commencement. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Peter Langley, representing the City Asset Management Office. Today we will be auctioning off several key parcels of land, including Lot 115A 1.5-acre property, located in the prestigious Callaway Estate neighborhood." The atmosphere immediately tensed. I could feel the collective shift in the room, eyes turning toward the large screen displaying an image of the property. A few whispers rippled through the crowd. I wasn't the only one interested in this land. Then a name came over the speakers, making me narrow my eyes. "Looks like we've got a formidable opponent," David muttered. "Marissa Hawthorne." I recognized the name instantly. CEO of Hawthorne Realty, a powerhouse real estate firm in the region. If she was after this land, it meant there was more to it than just financial value. "The starting bid for Lot 115 is $450,000. Let's begin." A hand shot up immediately. $500,000. I glanced toward Marissa Hawthorne, the icy blonde woman seated a few rows away. She leaned back in her chair, expression unreadable, exuding the confidence of someone who already believed they had won. I raised my paddle. $600,000. The murmurs grew louder. A few other investors began paying closer attention, but I knew there were only two real contenders, Marissa and me. $750,000, she announced coolly. David looked at me expectantly. I didn't hesitate. $1 million. Several heads turned toward me. Marissa did as well. Her sharp eyes met mine, and for a brief moment her lips curved slightly, a subtle challenge. $1,200,000. I clenched my jaw. Fine, if she wanted a battle, she would get one. $1,500,000. The entire auction hall seemed to pause for a brief moment. The auctioneer glanced toward Marissa, waiting for her reaction. I kept my expression composed, but inside, adrenaline coursed through my veins. Marissa slowly tapped her nails against the table. After a few seconds, she lifted her hand, then lowered it. I won. $1,500,000 going once? Going twice? Sold to Everland Investments LLC. I held my breath as the gavel struck the podium. A surge of triumph crashed over me like a tidal wave. I had done it. I was now the legal owner of the land beneath the Calloway family home. An hour later, after finalizing all the paperwork and leaving the auction house, David walked beside me, barely able to hide his satisfaction. Evie, you just secured something your family doesn't even realize they've lost. I clutched the contract in my hands, feeling the weight of it. From now on, they would have to play by my rules. My phone buzzed. Ryan. I stared at the screen for a moment before answering. Where are you? Why aren't you at the party? Ryan's voice carried mild annoyance. Mom and Dad are talking to some people from Pinnacle Development. They're discussing selling the house. I smirked. Oh, really? Yeah, apparently they want to redevelop the area into a luxury complex. Mom and Dad think it's a great deal. Is that so? You sound weird. What are you doing? I glanced down at the contract, the words Legal Owner, Everland Investments, LLC printed clearly at the top of the first page. Nothing, I replied smoothly. Just preparing a little surprise. And this time, they won't see it coming until it's too late. I sat calmly in my seat, feeling the cool glass of red wine in my hand as I took in the long dining table draped in pristine white linen. The crystal chandelier overhead cast shimmering reflections onto polished silverware and fine china. At the head of the table, my mother, Helen Calloway, looked more radiant than usual, while my father, Martin, maintained his usual composed demeanor. Ryan sat across from me, casually slicing into his steak, smiling at the guest of honor tonight, Richard Weston, CEO of Pinnacle Development. I already knew they would be discussing the house sale tonight. That's why I was here. The Calloway family has always had a remarkable strategic vision, Richard said smoothly. Our project will completely transform the area, and of course, property values will skyrocket. My mother nodded approvingly. Our family has thought long and hard about this. This estate has been a symbol, but we believe it's time for a change. My father exhaled quietly but said nothing. He never opposed my mother. Ryan turned to me, raising an eyebrow. What do you think, Evie? All eyes shifted toward me. I set my wineglass down, crossed my arms, and let a slow, knowing smile creep onto my lips. It's an interesting plan, I said, drawing out my words so they sank in. But it seems you've all overlooked one crucial detail. My mother frowned slightly. And what would that be? I reached for my leather bag beside my chair, pulled out a folder, and slid it across the table toward them. Before you discuss selling the house, you might want to check who actually owns the land. Richard furrowed his brows as he picked up the documents. Ryan leaned over, scanning the pages before chuckling. What is this? Did you print the wrong paperwork or something? I shook my head, my voice calm but dripping with satisfaction. There's no mistake. Our family doesn't own this land. We've only been leasing it under an old agreement. And that lease has expired. My mother's face went pale. Evie, what nonsense are you talking about? I tilted my head slightly, my gaze sharp and unwavering. 3 weeks ago this land was put up for public auction and it has a new owner now. The entire room seemed to freeze. I picked up my wine glass, swirling the deep red liquid slowly, before dropping the final bombshell. The new owner is me. Ryan's fork and knife clattered onto his plate while my mother stared at me as if I had just spoken an unthinkable truth. What? Her voice nearly rose to a shout. My father blinked a few times, while Richard Weston leaned back in his chair, his expression slowly shifting as he pieced it together. This can't be real, Ryan scoffed, though the tension in his voice betrayed his unease. How the hell did you afford to buy the land? I let out a small knowing smile. Oh, little brother, you really underestimate me, don't you? I'm a businesswoman, remember? I know how to invest. My mother slammed her palm onto the table, making the silverware tremble. What kind of stunt is this, Evelyn? Did you buy this land just to spite us? To destroy this family? I leaned forward slightly, my tone as calm as ever, yet razor sharp. No, Mother. I bought it to take back what should have been mine all along. Richard cleared his throat, breaking the heavy silence that had settled over the room. So, I've been negotiating with the wrong people, he mused, amusement flickering in his eyes. It seems I should be speaking with Evelyn, not the Calloway family. I set my wineglass down, a slow smile spreading across my lips. Finally, someone who understands. My mother turned to my father, as if expecting him to react, but he remained seated, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher, like he was seeing me for the first time. Ryan clenched his jaw. You can't do this. This is our home. I shrugged. It might be yours, but it was never mine. Not with the way Mother always kept me on the outside looking in. And now? We all play by new rules. Richard Weston chuckled, taking another sip of his wine, clearly entertained by the spectacle unfolding before him. Evelyn, if you're the landowner, then perhaps we should be discussing a partnership rather than a confrontation. My mother glared at me. What's your plan? To cancel the deal? Demand a higher price? I shrugged again, a glint in my eyes. Well, why don't you take a guess? No one spoke. The room was thick with tension, and I savored every second of it. I sat in my father's office, facing both him and my mother, while Ryan stood against the wall, arms crossed tightly, his face a storm of frustration. In front of me lay the Pinnacle development contract, unsigned. My mother, Helen Calloway, looked like she had swallowed something bitter. My father, Martin, sat in silence, fingers interlocked on his desk. Ryan, however, made no effort to hide his irritation. So this is your game, my mother finally broke the silence, her voice cold. You bought the land just to force us into doing what you want? I leaned back in my chair, my gaze steady. No, Mother, I replied smoothly but firmly. I bought it to reclaim what was rightfully mine from the start. Ryan let out a dry, humorless laugh. What do you want? Money? You're already successful. Why do you need the family's assets? I met my brother's gaze directly, a faint smile curling on my lips. It's not about money. It's about fairness. I placed another document on the table. The will I had found earlier. Mom and Dad decided to erase me from the will. Every single asset is being left to Ryan. My father sighed heavily while my mother remained silent, her eyes defiant. If you think I'm just going to accept this and walk away quietly, you're wrong. My mother crossed her arms, her tone sharp. Then what do you want? I slid another set of documents toward her. A new will. One that divides the inheritance fairly. She let out a cold, mocking laugh. And if I refuse? I shrugged. Then you can forget about selling this house. Without my approval, the deal with Pinnacle will never happen. Her jaw clenched. I could see her mind racing, trying to find a way to regain control. But this time I was the one holding all the power. This time I was setting the rules. Ryan turned to my father, frustration evident in his voice. Dad, you can't let this happen. There has to be another way. My father looked down at the papers on the table, his face more exhausted than I had ever seen. No, Ryan, he said, his voice low but firm. We've been wrong for too long. Ryan's eyes widened in disbelief. My father finally lifted his head, and for the first time I saw true regret in his eyes as he looked at me. I let your mother control everything for far too long. I stayed silent when I should have stood up for you. My mother turned sharply toward him, her expression livid. Martine. No, Helen, my father cut her off, his tone more resolute than I had ever heard before. Evelyn deserves to be treated fairly. She built her success on her own without relying on anyone. And yet, we erased her as if she never existed. Ryan shot up from his chair, kicking it slightly in his frustration. So you're siding with Evelyn now? I'm not siding with anyone, my father said calmly. I'm fixing a mistake. I looked at him for the first time, feeling like I had an actual ally in this fight. What are you willing to do to make things right? I asked, keeping my emotions in check. He took a deep breath, then reached for the pen on his desk. I'll rewrite the will, right now." The room fell silent as my father signed the new will, the one I had already prepared, the one that ensured equal inheritance between Ryan and me. My mother's hands clenched into fists, her knuckles turning white. "You can refuse, but it won't change anything," I said, my voice unwavering. "I will never let you control me the way you used to." She stared at me, her eyes burning with anger, but I saw something else flicker beneath the surface. Hesitation. Then, slowly, she picked up the pen and signed the document. "You've won, Evelyn," she said, her voice cold. "But remember, this changes everything." I held her gaze, unblinking. "Exactly, and that's what I want." She slammed the pen down on the table and stood up, walking out of the room without another word. Ryan remained standing, his grip tightening on the back of his chair, his expression filled with disappointment. "Are you happy now?" My brother's voice was hoarse with frustration. I looked at him, and for the first time I saw more than just anger in his eyes. There was something else, something that almost looked like hurt. "I never wanted things to turn out this way, Ryan, but if I hadn't done this I would have never had anything at all." Ryan didn't respond, he simply turned on his heel and walked out of the room. My father let out a deep sigh, but this time there was a quiet relief in his expression. He turned to me. "Thank you, Evie, for not giving up." I smirked slightly. "Dad, I never planned on giving up." And this time I had taken back what should have been mine all along. 3 weeks later, I stood in the large conference room of Everland Investments, my eyes fixed on the screen displaying the development plan for the estate. Beside me, Ryan sat with his arms crossed, still tense but no longer hostile. My father flipped through the documents, nodding at the details, and my mother, the one who had opposed me at every step, sat in silence, her expression contemplative. I took a deep breath, then spoke. "My new plan will not demolish the house." All eyes turned toward me. Ryan raised an eyebrow in surprise. "You're not going to sell it?" I shook my head. "No. I've thought about this a lot. Our family has been through too much conflict, and I don't want this house to become a symbol of division. If we're changing, then it deserves to change in a meaningful way too." My father straightened in his chair, now fully engaged in what I was saying. "Instead of selling to Pinnacle Development, I've been in talks with a new investment group to transform the area into a hybrid space, preserving history while integrating commerce." I gestured toward the blueprint on the screen. "The house will remain, but it will be renovated into a community center, a venue for historical exhibitions, local events, and co-working spaces for startups." Ryan's eyes widened. "You're kidding, you actually want to keep the house?" I met his gaze steadily. "This isn't just a house, Ryan. Even if Mom tried to erase my place in this family, I grew up here. It's part of us, and if it's going to stay, I want it to stand for something new. A symbol of change." My father stared at the plans, and I could see the moment he started envisioning it, imagining the future I had outlined. "I like this plan," he finally said, nodding. "It preserves what matters, but it also brings something fresh." I smiled. "I want all of us to be involved. Ryan and I will co-lead the project." Ryan chuckled softly, shaking his head. "Never thought I'd hear you ask me to work with you." I tilted my head. "And, do you want in?" He was silent for a long moment, then exhaled deeply. "You fought hard for this, and I think I finally understand why you had to. So if you want me in, I'm in." I nodded, feeling the weight lift from my shoulders. For the first time, my brother was standing beside me, not against me. I turned to my mother, the only one who had yet to say anything. "And you, Mom?" I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, then let out a slow breath. "I was wrong about a lot of things." The room fell silent. "I always believed that only one of you deserved to inherit this family's legacy. I convinced myself that Ryan was the future and you were just an outsider, but I was wrong." She looked at the design on the screen, then back at me. "You proved me wrong, and this time, I won't let my pride make me blind to my mistakes again." My father looked at her, then took her hand. For the first time in years, I saw them not as a couple who controlled everything together, but as two people trying to fix their mistakes. My mother turned her gaze back to me. "If you truly want to make this house a symbol of change, I'll stand with you." 3 months later, I stood on stage, with the Calloway family home behind me, now transformed into the Callaway Enterprise and Heritage Center. Hundreds of guests attended the grand opening, including investors, local entrepreneurs, journalists, and familiar faces from my family. My mother stood beside me holding a microphone. She had never been one to speak in public, but today, she had asked to say a few words. She scanned the audience, then spoke. Today, we are not just celebrating the launch of a new project. We are marking the beginning of a new family. A family we should have built long ago. She turned to me, her expression softer than I had ever seen before. Evelyn, you taught me that true strength doesn't come from control or power but from recognition and respect. And today I want to say something I never had the courage to say before. I am proud of you. Applause filled the room. I felt Ryan pat my shoulder, and my father smiled at me, his eyes filled with emotion. I stepped forward, taking the microphone, looking out at the audience. For the first time, I felt something I had never truly had. Real recognition from my own family. I spoke with confidence, my voice clear. Today is not just about a project. It's about what we lost, what we fought to regain, and what we will build together. I turned toward my mother, then to Ryan and my father. Family is not something we are simply given. It is something we must choose to build every single day. And today, I choose to keep this family. Another wave of applause erupted, this time louder, stronger. I looked up at the wall in the main hall. No longer just filled with Ryan's achievements, it now showcased both of our milestones. Next to the framed photo of Ryan receiving his first business award was a magazine cover featuring me as a successful entrepreneur. Beside my father's early company building days was a picture of my mother standing at today's grand opening. For the first time, we were all there together in the same story. The grand opening ended, but its impact lingered as my family and I stood inside the old house, now with a new identity. The soft glow of warm lights illuminated the wall ahead, where we were about to hang new photos. The old ones, once centered entirely around Ryan, had been replaced with a complete collection of both of us, capturing memories I once thought had no place in this family. Ryan held a framed photo in his hands, studying it for a moment before turning to me. "Do you remember this award ceremony?" He pointed to a picture of me at a business conference, receiving my first major industry award. I nodded, recalling the pride I had felt that day, and the loneliness, knowing that no one from my family had been there. "I sent invitations to everyone," I said, my voice steady but tinged with old resentment. Ryan lowered his gaze, guilt flickering across his face. "You know, I wanted to go," he admitted. "But Mom said it was just a small event. Nothing important compared to the company's board meeting." I believed her, and now, looking back, I'm sorry. The unexpected apology caught me off guard. I looked at my brother and for the first time, I didn't feel like I was fighting against him. Instead, I felt a quiet understanding. "It's in the past, Ryan," I said softly. "What matters is that we're here now, doing this together." My father stepped forward, holding a photograph my mother had taken of me during a keynote speech. He carefully placed it in a central spot on the wall, then turned to my mother, who stood silently, gripping another frame. She looked down at the image in her hands. It was a picture of me and Ryan as children, standing in our backyard, beaming as I held my very first trophy. Slowly, my mother stepped forward, carefully placing the photo at the center of the wall. When she stepped back, her eyes met mine. "This wall finally tells the truth," she said quietly. I didn't answer right away. I simply looked at her, feeling the weight of the moment, the reality of true change. For years I had longed for one thing, my mother's acknowledgement. And now, without grand words or empty gestures, she had given it to me through her actions. My father placed a hand on my shoulder, Ryan stood beside me, and my mother looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, one of pride. At last I had my place in this family, and this time it would never be erased.